Welcome to Running Out the Clock, the universe's premier SEC podcast. I was going to say the best SEC football podcast, but we've grown. We're doing basketball and maybe even a little bit of baseball.
Maybe hockey in the future? I don't know.
SEC hockey? Is that?
SEC hockey, dude.
State has like an intramural team or something, right?
Yeah, that's like a club team.
Right?
I don't know. I really don't know.
They play hockey. Even though the South sees ice about once every decade. But definitely not soccer or softball. None of that.
No, we'll have none of it.
I am your host, Butterscotch Benadryl, and I am joined today by world-renowned psychologist, therapist, and new ESPN analyst, Ro Hunter. Ro, how are you?
Oh, why can't I be Butterscotch or something like that? That's what I want to be. I want to be...
Ro Hunter, a.k.a. Jordan Goblet.
I'm doing well, man. I just got back from the beach today, so I'm kind of tired from my vacation and ready to talk some Gator football.
Yeah, very, very relevant. You were in Florida, and of course...
I know. All the talk of the town were about these Gators.
That's
about... That's not true,
Florida
actually.
Gator football. Yeah. No one's talking. Yeah.
Nobody's talking about it.
You're in Destin, right?
Yep, that's correct.
Something? Yeah.
I was in Destin.
That's like the other side of the panhandle from Gainesville. So.
Oh, yeah.
I guess they're all Florida State fans, which is terrible, and they've made really horrific life choices. So we're here to talk about the 2019 Florida Gator season. Last year, a quick recap, Florida went 10-3, winning a New Year's Day bowl game against that vaunted Michigan Wolverine team. It wasn't close. Florida dominated hilariously, much to Chandler's chagrin. Chandler, of course, our podcast mate, who is a rabid Ole Miss fan, who wants to see nothing but the personal and professional demise of Shea Patterson, who is now the Wolverine quarterback. Yeah, so last year was really weird. Dan Mullen comes in his first year back in Gainesville as head coach this time, after a very successful stint at Mississippi State. I say stint. He was there for the better part of a decade.
Yeah, it was a short time, just only 10 years.
Yeah, he was just in and out real quick.
It's in and out.
Very, very successful. I think he won 69 games in 9 seasons. Nice. And kind of built them up from the horrors of the Croom years.
I can attest.
And of course, he was. Yeah. Were you actually there while Croom was there?
I was. Oh yeah. Those were my years of college football. It was a joy.
How much of a joy? Tell us.
In detail. To quantify it, how much of a joy? I would say about 2 liters of joy, nothing more. It was not
2 years of joy.
Yeah.
How long was he there?
He was there for 4 years, I think. 5 years, maybe 4 years.
Didn't he beat like Alabama like every year or something?
Or
maybe he beat them on the road every time they were on the road or something. It was weird.
Yeah, no, he beat Nick Saban one year, the first year that Alabama had Nick Saban, and then he a couple years before that he beat whoever they had hired, and then they fired that guy and hired Nick Saban, and then Nick Saban was like, "Well, we're never going to lose to them ever again," and that's kind of stood the test of time now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They and of course, famously, Nick Saban has never lost a game at Alabama outside of Sylvester Croom.
Outside of Ole Miss, the weird Ole Miss victories against Nick Saban and that Johnny Manziel guy, and now Clemson.
That Johnny Manziel guy. Yeah. Nick Saban is really good at just finding one team or person that he can't beat.
Yeah.
For like 3 years.
Yeah.
And then beating them and then finding somebody else to kind of fulfill that same niche of theirs.
It's true.
but anyway, back to D- Dorn Mullins,
Merlin.
um, Don Merlins, back in Gainesville. Florida fans super excited until that loss to Kentucky, and then I think it was SB Nation put out an article that kind of talked about, hey, this is not going to be a quick turnaround, even though Dan Mullen's, kind of like bravado and all of his loud talking kind of made you think that it was going to be something exciting that was going to happen sooner rather than later. That Kentucky game just proved that Jim McElwain was a terrible recruiter, and the cupboards were bare, and there's a much further way to go. And then Florida didn't lose again until they played Georgia, beating the likes of Mississippi State on the road, eking out a close victory against a surprising LSU team before eventually losing to Georgia and Missouri. But last year's record of 10-3 was maybe a little bit higher than what the season actually looked like. That Mississippi State game, it took a lot of miscues by State and Florida basically playing a perfect game for that upset to happen at the time. And then, of course, they beat LSU 27-19 off of fourth quarter interception. Vanderbilt, they had to come from behind to beat them in that really weird game where it looked like we would have had possibly one of the first ever coach fights. I don't know if you remember how like that all went down.
I
Florida had
kind
a
of
guy
do.
that got like ejected for a targeting call or something on like a kickoff return or a punt return, something. And of course, Derek Mason's at like midfield yelling at somebody. I think it was Todd Graham actually, or somebody. And then Dan Mullen just like tilted upside down and rocket shipped off the sideline towards Derek Mason. And so that was weird and kind of hilarious. And then they had to come from behind against South Carolina.
Yeah.
So several games there like had something kind of gone the other way. Maybe Florida's closer to a 6-win season or a 7-win season than a 10-win season. But of course, that's football, right? It's a game of inches and seconds, and there's a lot of what ifs. But they kind of end the season 10-3. So, what were your thoughts about their season last year, Ro?
I mean, honest to God, I thought it was kind of surprising because it's a first-year coach, and so you never know how teams are going to respond to that. But they finished overall with a 10-3 record and 5-3 in the SEC. When previous Florida years, that just wasn't all that great. I know you
Wasn't
know
all that
very
great.
well. Wasn't all that exciting, and so you get a guy in Dan Mullen who immediately, right out the gate, is successful, which is kind of his bread and butter. I think at State it took him maybe a year, but we didn't. I think we did not finish ever with a losing season while he was under the reins. We might have finished even a couple of years here and there, but no, I think as far as the 2018 season, that it went really well for Florida. They just seemed to click when it was clicking. Although the offense was a bit inconsistent, but still they're still putting up 430 yards a game or something like that. I mean, they've not seen that much offense since Tim Tebow. So if as a whole, you have to look at the whole 2018 as a pretty big success, and it gets you excited for 2019, but you never know how the teams are going to respond to pressure because it's not like the East is terrible. I know the West is typically the gauntlet, but you have Georgia that they have to face this year, as well as a Kentucky team that seems to be okay. Other than that, yeah, maybe. Other than that, Florida looks to have another pretty successful year.
Yeah, and like maybe one of the more surprising things about last year was, um, coming off a 2017 season in which Felipe Franks threw 9 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, which is hashtag not good.
Which is hashtag not good.
Um, yeah, Joseph and I talked about in our South Carolina preview about quarterbacks and kind of their touchdown to interception ratio and how you really need to be 3 or 4 to 1 in that regard. So throwing 9 touchdowns to 8 interceptions isn't great, and so there's a lot of skepticism, probably deserved, about how Felipe Franks would kind of respond last season. And of course, Dan Mullen, the quarterback whisperer. I think that was actually what they called Jim McElwain. And
Yeah, I think you're
awful.
right, actually. Yeah.
So the real quarterback whisperer comes in, and Franks. It kind of took him a little bit to get going. He had an up and down season until really that fourth quarter against South Carolina. Franks ended the year throwing 24 touchdown passes and just 6 interceptions all year. Part of that was due to the better play of the offensive line. They cut down sacks from, I think in 17, there was like 25 plus, maybe even 30 plus sacks against, and they cut that down to about 10 last year. So a huge improvement. Franks really grew, especially over the last 3 games of the year. So last year, like you said, a huge surprise, I think, for a lot of people that I think people thought that they would improve just because it's really hard to not improve from a 4-win disaster. But maybe 6 wins, but to go, from 4 wins to 10 wins, absolutely thumping rivals like Florida State and an apparent new rival Michigan in the bowl game. That kind of put the SEC East on notice, I guess. That Florida may be a little bit ahead in the rebuild.
Yeah.
And so that brings us to 2019. The losses on offense this year are going to be, I think, a little bit difficult to overcome. They lose, I think, 4 of their 5 linemen to
That's right.
Graduation and the draft. So I don't care how good your backups are. When you have 4 brand new positions to come in, that's tough. I know that Florida has a really good offensive line coach. One of Mullen's kind of carryovers from his state years. Joseph speaks very highly of him, and it showed last year. But great coach.
That's right. I think it's Hevesy. I'm pretty sure that's who it is.
Yeah. I mean, players love him. When you track kind of their recruiting this past year, all the offensive line recruits talked about just how much they love the guy, how much they already just want to play for him. So that's a really good get, but it's still going to be super hard to replace those guys and not miss a beat,
Yeah.
But they bring back Van Jefferson, Kadarius Toney, and Trayvon Grimes at wide receiver. They did lose Jordan Scarlett, but really towards the end of the year, LaMichael Pirine had kind of replaced Scarlett as like the go-to guy.
Yeah, that guy turned out to be pretty legit. And he's coming back now too. Plus, I don't know, man, like looking at Florida's offense, they might have the deepest like wide receiver, like skill positions, like wide receiver. I mean, like that's something that Dan Mullen at Mississippi State never had. He never had true wide receivers, but Trayvon Grimes as well as Van Jefferson, like my goodness gracious, they might have the deepest wide receiver in all of the SEC.
Yeah. Van Jefferson, of course, coming over from Ole Miss last
That's
year.
right. Yeah.
His dad is like the wide receiver coach at Miami for the Dolphins. Just a really solid technical guy. Like he's not the fastest. He's not like gonna be like an Odell Beckham type of dude who can just catch whatever, but he's a very good technical player, runs, really crisp routes. As you said, Trayvon Grimes, I believe he's the guy that came in from Ohio State.
I
I didn't
think you're
realize
right.
this.
Yeah.
He's 6'5", 210 pounds.
Yeah.
Like that's a big dude.
That's a big dude. That's a very big dude.
Yeah. So tough to match up against a 6'5" guy who's also 210 pounds. Not what you really want when you're, fielding defensive backs that average, 5'10" and like 190 pounds.
Well, and there's
that's a
something.
tough matchup.
You hit on this a minute ago about the inaccuracy of Felipe Franks or whatever, but like there's something to be said about Dan Mullen and getting his quarterbacks to play consistently. Like Felipe Franks wasn't that accurate. I mean, a decent 58% of his throws he hit, but more importantly, over the last 5 games of the year, he had no interceptions whatsoever, and only threw 6 the entire year. I don't know what Dan Mullen tells these guys, but like he must pretty much blackmail them or something to get them to not throw interceptions. Because my goodness, I mean that's kind of impressive. If you look at his track record too, with even Fitzgerald and then Prescott before him, and even Tyler Russell back in Mississippi State days, those guys were known for just taking care of the football. So I see that translating this year pretty easily, just because they've had a year to get used to Dan and how he coaches and what he expects, and I only see improvement from guys like Felipe Franks and LaMichael Pirine. It's hard to say his name. I keep wanting to pronounce it Praline, but I know it's Pirine.
Yeah, Pralines. Gotta love some
Oh
Pralines.
man.
But yeah, like that's one of the exciting things about Dan Mullen is, Frank's at the beginning of the year. So he had a really, really good first game against Charleston Southern, but everybody would. But then like he had a bad game against Kentucky. He had an okay game against Colorado State. I mean, really not even okay. He was markedly average. Decent game against Tennessee, but so like he's still kind of struggling with the same consistency issues. So
yeah,
I just remember watching that game against State and just how Dan Mullen said, all right, we're going to get you some quick short passes. We're going to give you some like wide receiver screens, really easy things, get it in and out of your hands really quick so that you don't have to go through like large progressions, and just build your confidence up. And it worked out really well. He had 219 yards passing against Mississippi State, most of them within like really 5 or 7 yards of the line of scrimmage. And then the players just made plays, and so that's what you got to do with a guy that, might be kind of struggling with accuracy and consistently. So good for Dan to kind of get that going.
Well, you mentioned it a minute ago. What is the glaring hole in the offense?
The offensive line, definitely.
Just the line?
Just because you're just replacing so many guys. Like, I know that they had some really good recruits coming in, but you can't hand your offensive line over to a bunch of freshmen and expect them to be super competitive against, dominant defensive lines that the SEC has. It's just, that's a tough ask.
It is. It is.
Yeah, and LaMichael Pirine, man, he was a lot of fun to watch last year. Like, I think they were kind of billed as like Jordan Scarlett is like your downhill runner, and then Pirine was your kind of change of pace guy. And then remember they had Malik Davis, who went out like first or second game of the year with an injury.
Yeah, I do remember that.
So
guy.
He didn't play like at all last year, and he was the guy that picked up a lot of the slack for the suspended Jordan Scarlett 2 years ago. Kind of had a breakout season, looked really good, and so they were going into last year kind of with that three-headed monster in the backfield, and then he got hurt, which gave some time to Dameon Pierce. Get this, Dameon Pierce, true freshman last year. The team was really excited about him because as a true freshman, he was squatting 600 pounds.
Oh my goodness, dude. That's a lot, actually.
Yeah. He was squatting more than anybody on the entire team, including linemen, including senior linemen, including monsters like CC Jefferson. Like, just an absolute beast. And he's also like 5'8" or something. So incredibly powerful, incredibly short, just bulldozes people. So he's going to get some more reps this year. So he'll be a lot of fun to watch. But you summed up your thoughts earlier, Ro, about that offense kind of being deep and exciting, except maybe like the offensive line kind of being a question mark.
I mean, but my goodness gracious, though, I'm looking at highlights of all of P. Ryan's runs from last year on YouTube. Oh my gosh, dude! Screw this guy. Do we have to play Florida this year? I hope not. Ugh. I don't think we do.
Actually, think
no, we don't.
No. You get that one and done, man.
One and done. I'm fine with it. Florida looks dangerous.
Yep. Defense, however, is going to be
Studley.
Well, I mean, they lost a lot on defense. Remember last year they had those three really good rushing ends.
That's right.
CC Jefferson, Ja'Kai Polite, and Jabari Zuniga. Out of those three, only Zuniga's left. CC Jefferson graduated. Ja'Kai Polite went to the NFL draft. They lose linebacker Vojian Joseph and then safety Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. All of those guys are like dominant elite playmakers on the defensive side, and they lost all of them. So defense is going to, have some holes to fill. Luckily, they were able to bring back defensive coordinator Todd Grantham because he was apparently being pursued hard by the Cincinnati Bengals of the NFL. So that's super important. They had a really good class come in, but again, they didn't have any 5-star guys. They had a lot of 4 stars, so they've got really good depth. So it'll be interesting to see kind of who steps in. They've already had a guy who was supposed to play a lot of minutes at linebacker get lost for the season.
Mm-hmm.
So that sucks.
Yep.
A whole lot.
Yep. They had the Chris Steele guy. He transferred. He was the cornerback, I think.
Yep, he was an exciting quarterback prospect that left because of that whole possibly rape or sexual assault sort of thing, where he walked in on his roommate doing stuff to somebody, and Florida's offseason has been weird and terrible.
I hope it's not indicative of the actual season.
Oh man, yeah, hopefully not. But you did just kind of mention a player that I think Florida fans are going to be excited to watch, like that position. They have C.J. Henderson and Marco Wilson coming back, 2 of the country's top cornerbacks, and safety Brad Stewart Jr. is coming back. And David Reese, the second at linebacker, is coming back. So they do have some players coming back. As I said, Jabari Zuniga, who was a monster towards the end of the year. But they have some holes to fill,
Yeah, well, you have the good news. The good news is that 13 of the top 17 tacklers are back.
Mm-hmm.
So it's looking like safety and cornerback are going to be pretty okay. It's just up front, can they
Mm-hmm.
get pressure? Are they going to be able to get to the quarterback? Because like you said a minute ago, Jakai is gone, but they do get Jabari Zuninga. He's coming back too. So that's kind of the biggest thing. Like if they're going to be able to show up and kind of get it done on up front. But we shall see.
Yeah, and that's going to be kind of the thing here. Like the SEC this year, I think you're going to see like a lot of quarterbacks kind of light the way for their offenses. We're so used to SECs kind of being built offensively around really good running backs and dominant offensive lines and just running the ball. I think that we're going to see an uptick in passing. So Florida has the secondary to deal with it, but are they going to be able to get enough pressure up front with CC gone, with Polite gone, with Vojan Joseph gone? All those guys were high event, high energy pass rushers, um, and they're all gone. So it's going to be really fun and interesting and potentially devastating to see kind of how that defense turns out. Um, so let's look at the schedule real quick before we wrap up this 2019 Florida football Gators preview. They opened the season against Miami on August 24th, something that we hope to have some sort of live event for all of our dedicated listeners. It's really interesting. They're playing on a Thursday night, and they're playing like the college football kickoff game.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Florida's never done that. Florida, for as long as I've been like actively following and watching Florida football, they've never played on a Thursday night. So this is just bizarre on every level for me. And of course, Dan Mullen's best friend Manny Diaz is down is down there.
Where are they playing?
Coaching,
are they playing?
the
Are they playing in Gainesville or?
No, it's let me find it.
I'm looking it up right now. It's Orlando.
Yeah, Camping World Stadium in Orlando.
Yeah,
Camping World Stadium, because that's a thing.
Because that's where you go to camp, man, in the stadium.
Yeah, Camping World. So, what do you think about this Gator 2019 schedule, Ro?
Well, looking at it here, I predict. Look, all you Gator fans, you got every reason to be excited about the season, but this schedule is set up to be just a little tricky. It doesn't exactly favor the Gators, mostly because they have two decent in-state rivals in the non-conference play. Yikes. But you look at all their biggest SEC games that take place on the road, with the exception of Auburn. You're at Kentucky, at LSU, at South Carolina, at Missouri, and as usual, you get the stupid neutral site for the Georgia game. So,
and by stupid you mean amazing.
Well,
yes.
The world's greatest drunken party of whatever they call it, the martini game.
Cocktails, man.
Yeah.
Cocktail weenie parties.
Whatever. This season could easily be a 4-loss team if the Gators they don't step up from this as a program from last season. If they trip up against Miami in that first game, the season could spiral into ineligibility for bowl games. So that's how crazy the schedule is. It's really kind of hard to predict, but I'm not sure that the 10 wins is out of the realms of possibility. However, it's looking like that cocktail party is going to be the winner of the SEC East. That's going to come down to that game in November. So, I could easily see this. All right, let's look at it. We could go Miami. We'll count that as a win. I just assume that that Miami still is a dumpster fire.
Mhm.
UT Martin, that's 2 wins. Kentucky, they're at Kentucky. I don't think that they're going to be that like the same Kentucky from last year, so we'll go that 3 wins right there. Then you get to host Tennessee, which we all know that's going to be a win. Townsend, another win there. So versus Auburn is where you start seeing kind of like a real that they should be 5-0 when they host Auburn.
Mhm.
At that point, you're going to know exactly what this team is really made of, because I think Auburn's going to be pretty good this year. Because then you have to go on the road at LSU, at South Carolina, and at that, I mean, LSU. I don't know. The Tigers are going to be pretty good this year. We predicted them to have an implosion last year, so I'm going to go against that.
Yeah, I mean, it's LSU in Baton Rouge. That's it doesn't matter how bad they are or like how good they are. That's Florida versus LSU in Baton Rouge is always a game.
Yeah,
Like every single time.
yeah, yeah. And well, see that you're looking at possibly having 6-1 when you face Georgia, who inevitably will be unbeaten at that point. For
Mhm.
the SEC championship for the East. Because then you're finishing out with Vanderbilt, Missouri, and then Florida State, and what would be scary, that rivalry game against the Noles. Like, why is anybody worried about the Florida State anymore? Who knows? Well, they're so bad. They're so bad, and they're not going to be any better this year. So you're looking at having a possibly really, as I look at it, there's really tricky games with Auburn, without South with playing at South Carolina, because you just never know with those people. They're very cattywampus. And then
Nice word
thank
choice.
you. And then you have Georgia. So there's about, all the games are important, blah 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 blah, but there's really about 2 or 3 games that are really important on their schedule. But so it's doable to have another 10-win season. It really is.
Yeah, I think their ceiling is probably 10 regular season wins with an 11th win in a bowl game potentially. Um, I say that's their ceiling. I mean, they could very well surprise and go 11-1. It just depends um, on a few things. What has to go right for them to win 10 or 11 games
Oh man,
in your
well,
mind?
in my mind, it's probably going to have to be the offense. The offensive line is going to have to be solid again. They're going to have to kind of just pick up from where they left off, fill in the holes, and give a lot of protection for their quarterback extraordinaire. But that I would have to say that. Of course, that is their weakest spot, but they got that Forsyth, I think, is the offensive tackle. He's a junior, and he looks to replace a excellent guy in Jawan Taylor. So he's 6'7"
Mm-hmm.
and 323 pounds, and he'll be looking to lead that offensive line. I don't really see them. I don't see them taking a step back. Just knowing what I know from Mississippi State, our offensive line every year, especially with Hevesy there, I mean, it wasn't ever really that big of a worry. We always had a good offensive line for the most part. I mean, it kept us in a lot of games. So I just don't see that being a huge deal. So that's why I say they're the weakness and the key, because if they screw it up, then yeah, Florida's going to have a pretty bad season. What do
I
you?
would expect nothing less than stellar analysis from newly minted ESPN analyst Row Hunter.
Yeah, absolutely. I got the
Yeah,
helmets to
yeah.
prove it, dude.
His home studio set up by ESPN.
Yep.
No, I fully agree with you. I think that this offense hinges off of the ability of the offensive line to kind of fill and replace and continue to grow. And then, of course, the continued development of a former top quarterback prospect, Felipe Franks, now in his third year as the starter for the Gators. Well, one thing that I forgot to mention earlier, whenever you're talking about just how deep their wide receivers are, um, a lot of the talk coming out of the spring game was just how badly the Florida wide receiving crew torched the Florida secondary. And the Florida secondary is really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like top 5 in the country probably. And they were just saying like just how badly they were outmatched by the Florida wide receivers. So that's going to be something to watch for sure. Something that we really haven't seen since Tebow since Tebow was throwing to like Riley Cooper and Aaron Hernandez and those guys. But yeah, 10 wins is the ceiling. Maybe 11. I think 7 is the floor for them. I agree. They for all intents and purposes should be 5-0 going into Auburn. Yeah, they're at Kentucky, but Kentucky lost a lot of what made them potent last year. Between Snell leaving and their defensive guys leaving, I would say that while they'll probably still be like a top half program in the SEC East, I don't think that they're going to be what they were last year.
Yeah,
for sure.
probably not. Probably not.
And as little as Florida and Auburn play each other, those games are always difficult. Seems like Auburn always beats Florida on a last-second field goal for no reason. Doesn't matter if it's a 65-yarder or whatever.
Right.
Like they always make it and they always win. And like we talked about last week in our preview for South Carolina, just how odd of a team they are. Like they beat people randomly when they shouldn't, and they lose to people randomly when they shouldn't. So playing at South Carolina, like you said, it's all cattywampus. It's all weird. And then Georgia, yeah, it'll be an interesting season. What's really weird though, they have 3 bye weeks this year.
They have 3?
Florida does. 3
How do they pull that off? That's not fair.
Nation leading 3 bye weeks. Yeah, well, part of it's because they moved the Miami game up a week to accommodate the college football kickoff weekend. So they have a week off after the Miami game. They have their annual bye week before Georgia. And they also have a randomly placed bye week before their last game of the year against Florida State after that Missouri game. So I'm not going to complain.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah. So, well, you have any more thoughts or comments about the 2019 Florida Gators?
Man, I don't. I can't think of anything else.
Well, if not, that's gonna wrap up this episode of Running Out the Clock. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at ROTC. Follow myself at KP Harkins. Ro, do you have a Twitter?
I don't have a Twitter. I'm behind
plug?
the times, very much so. I have 0 tweets. You can't find me. You can't find me on that Twitter when they coming for me. I ain't there.
ESPN's going to talk to you about that because I think you have to have one. But that's going to do it for us here. Again, I'm your host, Butterscotch Benadryl, and signing off for Joe Mugshot Turnbuckle, a.k.a. Roe Hunter.
I like it.
Good night.